pollution liability too, called CPL. So we write it for general contractors, any type of, contractors like water intrusion type contractors, landscaping, insulation, masonry, roofing, plumbing, you name it. Pretty much any contractor has some pollution exposure, but also, I do this for a living, so I would say every contractor has pollution exposure. So contractor's pollution liability, what it does, it's in a way a backfill for a total pollution exclusion in the GL form. So it covers third party for bodily injury, property damage, and cleanup costs arising out of a pollution condition, and it results out of insured's operations. So as the contractor is working on somebody else's site and performing their services, if they cause a pollution incident, we're there for them. Sometimes your GL policies will give some time element or some limited pollution coverage, but what you get from us is an environmental carrier, if we cover completed ops type exposures, AI type exposures, and many others that come along. Policies nowadays for CPL are written on occurrence basis. Most of the time, I want to say 98% of the time, claims made is available. If you're worried about retaining retro dates, we have nose and or tail endorsements, however you want to call it, to actually switch a claims made policy to an occurrence policy. One important thing for these policies is that your insured needs to understand that we cover work performed by them or in their behalf, kind of like an ISO-GL. We have the identical ICGL verbiage on our CPL policy. We can write a practice policy, meaning for all of their receipts during the year, and we can do a 1, 2, and 3 year practice policies. They get some significant savings if they already usually are a buyer, so you can incentivize them by buying a 2-year or 3-year practice policies because they get about 20 to 30% savings per year. We can also do a project-specific policy, which means we wrap the policy, the pollution policy, around a specific project that requires pollution. And usually the way we do that is we list the contract that it relates to and the entity that contract relates to on the policy. A project-specific policy can be from anywhere from 1 through 15 years. We can do total of 17 years, including completed ops or ERP on an account when it comes to pollution. One thing you may or may not see, but we also write, there's GL wraps, OSIPs, and CSIPs, owner-controlled insurance policies or contractor-controlled insurance policy. We can also do a pollution wrap for a project. Now, one thing Westchester always prides itself is on the quality of coverage. I think a lot of times, actually in the environmental space, we're extremely competitive on price and coverage. When you get into larger risks, we might not be the cheapest ones, but we do give you the greatest coverage, I think. One thing that you need to kind of be aware of with pollution, when you get a quote from us, we usually come out with all of the enhancements attached along with our proprietary form. So you get a mil or two of separate defense on the top of the limit, so the defense doesn't erode the limit right away. Our third-party transportation pollution is built into our form. We usually give you what they call transportation pollution liability with every quote. For contractors, when they dispose of the pollutants or hire a third party to dispose of the pollutants that might happen during the work, we give you non-owned disposal site coverage. And if you have a slightly larger contractor, when I say larger, maybe they have more than $5 or $10 million in revenue and they have a site, that they own or lease where they park their vehicles, have a garage, maybe have some tanks, some warehousing activities. We also include some accidental premises pollution liability with our CPL quotes. Our capacity is $25 million in limits. Usually that's enough. If that's not enough, we can always do, we also do unsupported access pollution coverage where we can stack either on top of other carriers, so that way when you're building a tower, you also need to keep us in mind about that. Now, as an environmental carrier, you guys more or less expect us to provide coverage for environmental contractors and environmental consultants. There on the screen you can see some examples of what we consider an environmental contractor. We usually look for about 50% of their gross revenues, yearly gross revenues, to come from environmental operations. So what we can do for those contractors, we give them what we call a full pollution casualty package minus work comp. So we give them general liability, contractor's pollution liability, professional liability. We can include premises pollution and products pollution if that's the exposures that they have. Again, variety of our coverages can be on occurrence and claims made basis. These days in this competitive market, most of them are occurrence. Professional will be claims made, as site pollution will be claims made. If we have an account that we can offer GL coverage to, we have primary commercial auto as a support line to our GL package, and then also we can do follow form access, supported again and unsupported over an environmental risk. And our capacity there is 25 mil. One thing that I didn't mention when I was talking about CPL coverage is that the minimum premium is $1,000, which is a lot less than it has ever been in the industry, and a 5.5, which usually sometimes contract will require a 5.5, is $5,500. And for majority of non-environmental contractors, if they're required by contract, and sometimes they are, we can also include professional liability as a part of CPL coverage on the project-specific and practice basis. So I did not want to forget to tell you that. When it comes to environmental consultants, your phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 assessment guys, people testing, monitoring, feasibility studies of pollutants, designing systems and protocols for remedial action, environmental labs, people doing wetlands delineation, natural resources consulting, things like that is what we consider environmental consultants. And again, in that case, we give them a package of coverages, GL, CPL, PL, premises pollution, and others, and then we can do auto and follow form access as support lines. One thing to note is our professional services definition is very, very broad, and again, we cover services performed by the insured or in their behalf, which is also broad in the way it should be. Now, another coverage that we have been very, very successful in writing is premises pollution liability, fixed site pollution liability, environmental impairment liability. Different carriers call it different things. But basically where we've been successful writing site pollution is a myriad of commercial, habitational, residential, retail, hospitality, mixed-use type properties, anything from apartments and condo association to strip malls to tune and lube places, car dealerships, just to mention some that have, if you will, a slightly lower exposure to pollutants, depends where they're located. And then obviously we can write any type of environmental facility like landfills, transfer stations, recycling centers. If it's a true environmental facility, that is where we can include GL coverage along with the pollution and auto and excess support lines. We also write monoline site pollution on any type of light and heavy manufacturing facilities, transportation facilities, portfolio of properties, transactional stuff where a bank is requiring them to have site pollution coverage in order for the loan to go through or, sale to happen. And obviously, as an environmental carrier, we can do complex environmental properties like brownfield redevelopments and things like that also. Again, this coverage used to be very expensive. When I first started underwriting, not to date myself, a minimum was $15,000 for site pollution. Nowadays, you can get, a $250K limit if that's all the contract requires, the lease or the bank, for $950. One is $2,000. So it has gotten significantly less expensive to get this coverage. And, what you get with site pollution, the standard coverage is, BIPD, cleanup costs, along with first and third party, applies to both first and third party. It could be for new and pre-existing pollution conditions. And, one thing that goes for all of our products, we always include in the definition of a pollutant mold, Legionella. We cover illicit abandonment, silt and sedimentation type exposures, bacteria, viruses. We have an extremely broad pollutant definition, which is one of the reasons why I think we're a good carrier to place coverage with, because we tend to be extremely broad in our coverage. Obviously, other things that we offer with site pollution is coverage for non-known locations and blanket coverage for non-known disposal site, transportation pollution coverage. So, just again, a myriad of options that we can create for whatever exposures your insured has or whatever they're willing to purchase. And again, if we have a true environmental type facility, like I said, landfills, transfer stations, recycling centers, then we can do GL coverage along with primary auto and follow-form access. So keep that in mind too if you see any recycling centers or landfills in your area. Another product we are probably one of the top carriers in, and I'm going to mention, because probably most of you, if you do product manufacturers and distributors, especially the ones that have some pollution exposure, you probably are familiar with AIG Eagle. Well, we have our version of that, and we compete with them and other carriers, which there are not that many that can do this type of coverage. And where we're successful at and the type of risks that we write, GL, products pollution, we can add site pollution, transportation pollution, auto and excess or support lines in this case too. We write a lot of drum and container manufacturers, valves, pipes, obviously storage tanks. We do a lot of chemical blenders, paint manufacturers, coatings manufacturers, air water filtration equipment, just different type of any product that's more of a wholesale product. We don't really write things that go on the shelves of Walmart or Target, but we probably write manufacturers of components that go into those products. On the right side of the screen, you'll see some of the things we will not write this coverage for, and corporately we stay away from critical auto parts, airspace, medical equipment. We can't do any hydraulic fracturing products, anything going down the hole. But other than that, if you think that a product has pollution exposure, you can probably send it over to your friends in Tuscano and they can run it by us. Again, it just kind of tells you we're probably one of the only carriers that can do products pollution in a package with GL and also on a standalone basis. And I think we're the only one that I know of that can do it on occurrence. So if you have an insured that's in love with their, GL policy that they have. Let's say they're a valve manufacturer or something. And even though they see they may have some pollution exposures, they don't want to leave their GL carrier, we can write a standalone, a monoline products pollution liability to kind of marry really well with their GL coverage. If they do not want to write, let us write GL and other lines for them too. Again, capacity is up to 10 million limits. On monoline products pollution, the minimum premium is $5,000. On the package is 10. So that covers that one. Now, I'm going to go quickly through what we consider environmental energy type risks, where we have limitation in the area where you're located, which it's in 4 states, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and New York. We have limitations on offering a package, a GL, because of the Marcellus Shale, again, corporate edict. But we can look at the CPL coverage. We can look at monoline pollution. So, again, any contractors kind of working on an oil field. And so keep us in mind regarding your energy accounts also. Any questions, again, send them through Tuscano. We'll get you the answer. And then, like I mentioned in the beginning, we're one of the largest writers of pollution for underground and above ground storage tank. 80% of our book are convenience stores and gas stations, but we also do some, farm-related properties, obviously manufacturing, municipalities, hospitals, schools, colleges, universities, anyone that pretty much has a tank that contains a petroleum product. And obviously, we also service auto dealerships and airports, too. We typically insure tanks up to 30 years of age and up to 50,000 gallons. And we have a specific product for that that's admitted. Any tanks over that age or over that capacity, we can look on an offline underwriter, E&S paper, larger premiums and deductibles type bases, where then we require tank tightness tests and a lot more underwriting information than when the tanks are younger. And that brings me to running really quickly through a lot of the accounts that a lot of the products that we offer and the type of risks that we see. So we have about another 9 minutes, and what I wanted to do is show you guys a couple of other things that might be of interest to you. And I wanted to kind of mention about just exposures. One of the largest products that we sell is CPL, Contractors Pollution Liability. And a lot of times your non-environmental contractors, unless they are required by a contract, they typically don't think that they have any exposures, and they typically don't pay for the coverage unless they think that the exposures are there. So I just wanted to give you some examples and run through a couple of those. Let me see if I can find my spiffy little document that I wanted to share with you all. Here we go. Hopefully everyone can see. It says mechanical contractors, common environmental exposures. So I just wanted to run through some of this with you guys so that way, typically your mechanical contractors, your HVAC guys, they have, in my opinion, a ton of air quality, mold-related pollution exposures that probably their GL policy is not addressing. So, sometimes they do improper disposal of waste materials where our non-owned disposal site coverage kicks in. They could be transporting unknown contaminated materials. They can have large fuel oil spill leaks from either vandalism or just from their own equipment. But main exposure on your mechanical contractors will always be mold or any type of air quality related issue. And it's not just mold. It can be bacteria. It can be virus. Let's say they're working at the hospital installing an HVAC system. So any type of heating, ventilation, air conditioning, construction, and maintenance errors can cause some airborne bacteria or fungus that could turn into a pollution condition. So this is definitely something to keep in mind when you're looking at your mechanical contractors. There's also some, exposures that they may have from faulty design. If they're subcontracting certain operations, they can have some pollution exposures there. Now, your myriad of residential contractors have a ton of pollution exposures. In your area, they could disturb some naturally occurring asbestos or some asbestos that's in tiles or pipe coatings. They can encounter some lead paint. If they do any subsurface investigations, they can impact underground utility or ghost tanks, something that hasn't been discovered, and create a pollution condition. And it can be even something that they don't realize during the course of the job. They can be off the job, and 3 years down the line, it's discovered that something they have done has caused damage to third parties' property that they were working on. And, that's when you need to have the CPL coverage, because it gives you coverage for, completed operations, which most of the GL, even if they give you some limited pollution, is not there for them. Another thing to consider, all the transportation pollution exposures, they are all going to have that. So there's some of that listed there. Street and road contractors, they have a ton of pollution exposures. One of the main ones that we deal with and people don't think about, they can have stormwater runoff. And a lot of times it can even impact local streams or even rivers and cause sedimentation to be larger and bigger and that can impact natural resources too. So that's something that probably people don't contemplate on, but they can have a pollution type of claim from that. Everybody's more environmentally conscious these days. Another thing is floor drains for spilled fuels and oils can flow onto surface waters. Any shop or anything with large equipment can have that happen. Electrical equipment containing PCBs, if you transport them around and they flip over out of the truck, that's a pollution incident. So I wanted to run through some of these just to give you some examples of what can happen and the contractors just don't think about. Utility contractors can have, some completed op exposures from improper line hookup. It can cause whatever's going through that line to leak. They can overuse herbicides and pesticides. They can impact groundwater while they're doing their drilling and excavation work and cause cross-contamination of aquifers. So that's definitely something we see happening. So that's definitely. Now, your general contractors and construction managers, if they are subbing out any type of remediation work to subs, they can rely on the subs insurance, but if they run out, we're always there for them because we cover work, obviously, performed by the named insured and on their behalf. So I think any contractor over $10 million revenue should definitely buy a contractor's pollution liability just to protect themselves. Last but not least, regarding CPL, a lot of times if professional is required, and sometimes a contractor will express an opinion or deviate from the specs based on their experience, and technically they have provided an opinion and they have E&O exposure in that case. So that is something we always include means and methods for contractors as a part of our coverage, but we can also include a full-blown professional liability if that's something they would consider. So that leaves me a 1 minute. So another one I wanted to touch on was site pollution coverage. And just keep in mind that with $2,000 in minimum premium on site pollution, we can probably sell a lot of that coverage for you also and give you some exposure examples to talk about with your insurance.
Stella, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yay! Okay, sorry I didn't jump in at the beginning. I appreciate you just jumping in and taking this thing over and going. Very much appreciate your info. I just wanted to say a couple of really quick things for those customers of ours that are on the phone. The casualty team here at Tuscano handles the pollution and environmental exposures. We certainly value Westchester as a partner for all of these coverages and exposures. We're frequently calling the underwriters asking questions on risks that we may not be sure about. If you have a question and you're not certain, I totally agree with Stella. Almost every contractor has this exposure. I get it if somebody's making $20,000 a year as a handy person or as an artisan, you may have a difficult time selling them a separate pollution policy. But the mid to larger size contractors, manufacturing risks, really should be looking hard at getting them that coverage if it doesn't exist. Our casualty team, if you don't know them, when you go to Tuscano.com, look at any one of those folks and give us a call and ask us, run it past us. Info@Tuscano.com is the email address where you can send something in, or if you do have a relationship with one of our casualty underwriters, by all means call or email. You can call me. We're happy to walk through the possible exposures, talk to you about possible claim scenarios, and just try and give you some ideas about how you can present this to your customer. So, and that's really all go ahead.
No, one thing I wanted to add, one of the services we provide for all of our insureds, we have this thing called Westchester Incident Alert. And what it is, and especially is important in smaller to mid customers, they don't have necessarily a risk manager in staff. It's an 800 number, or they can download an app on their phone as long as they have our policy number. And it's a risk management free of charge service where anything happens on the job, they can call us, and they are automatically connected with our risk management and also with spill control. So that way we can send help, mitigate the claim, help them with EPA or other state regulatory requirements, things like that.
Very good. Very good.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We don't want to use up any more time than we asked for. So, again, Stella, thank you so much for sharing. Thanks for everybody who was on the line listening today, and we hope to see submissions from you for environmental exposures. Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.